Support comes from the Arizona Inn, a four-diamond, family-owned historic resort hotel and restaurant on Elm Street near the U of A. Information is at arizonainn.com.
Everyone, I'm Jim Ninsel, the executive editor of the Tucson Weekly and Tucson Local Media, and we're here to talk Zona politics. Joining me today, Arizona Daily Star political reporter Joe Ferguson and Tucson Weekly staff reporter Danielle Camara. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Good to be here.
So, Danielle, I want to start with the 4th Avenue. You did a story this week about what's going on 4th Avenue with these new developments. There's 3 major developments in the works. People are very worried about the funky vibe of 4th Avenue, whether that's going to change as more of these developments come along.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about the 3 developments that are in the works.
Sure. So one of them, which seems to be the one that has the most support from the community, it's going to go around the Trinity Church that's on 4th Avenue and University Boulevard. And that one is going to be 4-story residential on 4th Ave and then 3-story office buildings in the Time Market parking lot on University. And that one, developers, it's local developers, and they've been working with the church and working with the neighborhood associations for about 6 years, and they've been working with them very closely to create a development that the community is in support of. There's going to be little pocket parks. It's permeable to 4th Ave, so people can walk into the development in certain places. Oh, and there is going to be also some retail on the ground floor or restaurants or something like that. So that one so far kind of has the most support, and they're probably going to start with the office buildings first. And then the next one is where the Flycatcher is right now, and that seems to be kind of one of the most controversial ones, mainly because the developers are EDR. They're a student housing company out of Memphis, and they have branched out recently to do developments that target more young professionals and grad students. So that's what that development is going to be.
Right on 4th and 6th.
It's on 4th and 6th. And it's going to be 2 and 3 stories right on 4th and on 6th, and then going back, it's going to go up to 7 stories. And they say it's not going to be student housing. That area with the zoning that they're using, they're not allowed to do what's called a group dwelling. So they're not allowed to have, a place with 6 bedrooms and people have 6 different leases. They're not allowed to do that. So they're going to have mainly studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms, a few 3 bedrooms. And then the next development is down towards the south end of historic 4th Avenue, where Maloney's is right now. And right there, they're going to tear down the Maloney's and the warehouse that's next door to it, and in the parking lot as well. They're going to put, in the front there's going to be some retail that's going to be the same height as what's already on the avenue. And then behind it, it's going to be rising in levels until it gets to, it could be as high as 14 stories. And that would be on the west side of the avenue that's behind 4th Avenue.
Going up kind of against the railroad tracks and
Yeah,
stuff back
exactly.
in that corner. Okay.
Yeah.
And Joe, there really isn't much the city council can do about much of this because the zoning's already in place for a lot of these developments.
Well, the big question has to do with the infill incentives and how the city council interprets that. I think you could see some challenges related to parking, because the developer is still trying to work with the city council on that. And so that could be a sticking point down the road, especially on the last 2 that you mentioned. So it's a big concern for retailers as well as people that live nearby on what's going to happen at night when those parking machines go off.
And Danielle, you mentioned the one that's going in at 4th and 6th is probably the most controversial. The one down by the University Boulevard, the neighbors have really worked with the developers, and they're pretty happy with
and
going
the
there.
church that owns that property is very happy with the developers.
And down at the end, down where Maloney's is now, that one just got a rezoning, and the neighbors got some money from the developers, and they're kind of happy with that.
Yeah, so there is an agreement that $25,000 is going to be spent on traffic mitigation in the Iron Horse neighborhood that's down there, and then it seems like another $10,000 is going to go to 6th Avenue, but parking and traffic is one of the main concerns that people have. So yeah, all the developments have done some kind of traffic study that shows that they're not going to need as much parking as people think. But I think it's going to be hard to say until they all go in.
And you talked with Corky Poster about how he helped develop this so-called infill incentive district.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about the
Sure.
infill incentive district?
Yeah. So the infill incentive district is basically something that was created so that to incentivize developers to not, right now 4th Avenue is zoned for 6 stories. And so it's basically was created to incentivize developers not to build 6 stories, not to tear down historic structures, which they are legally allowed to do, they have every right to do, but to build something that's more in line with kind of Tucson culture and what's there already. So something that kind of matches. So with the infill incentive district, which is basically a zoning that the developer can opt into if they choose, they're not allowed to tear down historic buildings. They can only build 2 stories on 4th Avenue, except for on the corners. They can go up to 3 stories. Because they fall in line with those regulations, they get breaks on certain things like parking. They get breaks on height restrictions farther back from the avenue. So it's kind of like a give and a take.
And you've also talked with the folks from Local First Arizona about this whole idea of community benefit agreements, which is a way that some folks on the avenue and elsewhere are trying to work with developers to create a different set of incentives.
Yeah. So that's basically, it's a new idea, and developers have been working, even like with the development that's going where Maloney's is right now. The developers did work with the neighborhood associations to come up with some agreements, like the traffic mitigation, like a certain number of parking spots that are going to be in their development that's going to be for public parking. So the community benefits agreement would take that like a step further, and it would be a legal agreement between a community group like, say, the Merchants Association or a neighborhood association and the development. And it could have any number of things in it. It could have, they are required to do a certain number of retail locations, retail spaces that are small enough for local businesses. It could be they're required to do beautification of the neighborhood around it. It could have to do with money for traffic mitigation. There's a bunch of different things that could go in there. And basically, the developer, one reason why they would choose to opt into doing that would be for their reputation, because if they did that, they would be good neighbors and they would go to a city council meeting asking for incentives, asking for a rezoning with the backing of the community. Another reason why they would do that is because if they want incentives from the city council, if the city council gets on board with the idea of a community benefits agreement, then they could withhold incentives until the developer works out something with these community groups, if that's what the city council decides to back.
So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
I want to shift over to Congressional District 2, very crowded race among Democrats for the seat that Martha McSally is leaving to run for the U.S. Senate. And Joe, there's still candidates even starting to get into this race at this point, but we did see a poll come out this week from Matt Hines' campaign. He's the former state lawmaker who has run for this seat previously. And this is a poll commissioned by his campaign, but he seemed to show the race was really boiling down to a two-way race between him and Ann Kirkpatrick. And what did you take away from that survey?
It sounds like that there are some Democrats who remember Matt from 2 years ago and still are looking at him. And, this is a little bit of a surprise to see it's such a close race between 2 Democrats when you've got 7 that are in there. And some of them are fairly well known. Bruce Wheeler has been in local politics and involved for decades. So it's an interesting poll. And, some of the things that Matt pointed out and put out in his press release related to some kind of misgivings about Ann Kirkpatrick, who's a Blue Dog Democrat from northern Arizona, where politics are just a little bit different than they are down here. So, it will be telling to see what happens in the next couple of months, but, it seems to suggest that there's going to be a two-way race for the time being.
And we have seen establishment Democrats losing just this week in some states where the kind of the upstart Democrat who didn't have the backing of the DCCC or whatever came through. And Kirkpatrick clearly has the support of the DCCC at this point. But you've mentioned she's from northern Arizona. She's just moved down here to southern Arizona to be near her family, but also to run for this seat.
Right.
And are you hearing? You've been talking to a lot of folks, been going to forums and stuff. Are people concerned about Kirkpatrick's? Are they calling her a carpetbagger, I guess is the question.
That's certainly been discussed since she got into the race, but I think the thread goes even a little bit further. There are some people that feel that the National Dems have chosen a winner in this race, and there's some misgivings on the ground locally about that. And so they don't like the DCCC kind of backing a horse so early in the race when they haven't even gotten a chance to know some of the newer candidates that are out there. We've only had a couple debates. We're pretty early in the fundraising cycle, and we're already seeing all this money come in to one specific Democrat.
Right. Kirkpatrick has certainly dominated the fundraising race at this point.
Unless you pull out your checkbook like Matt did.
Right, where he was able to write himself a $250,000 check in this most recent round. And on the Republican side, it looks like we'll see who ends up filing for that race. But Leah Marquez Peterson, the head of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, still looks like she's the favorite in that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And speaking of Martha McSally, Joe, she recently pulled her sponsorship of a bill to deal with the DACA kids, the Dreamers. The Republicans are trying to force a vote on this bill right now, trying to get it out through a discharge petition to the House floor. McSally's withdrawn from that. She has a different bill that falls more in line with the Trump administration's priorities when it comes to immigration, that involves limiting legal immigration and wall building and a bunch of other stuff. Is this McSally moving to the right as she gets into this primary with Kelly Ward, former state lawmaker Kelly Ward?
I think that's a fair criticism.
And Joe Arpaio.
I think that McSally has shifted a little bit of what she wants to talk about when she's in public, and it seems like she's made a couple changes in terms of where she stands on specific issues. And the DACA one is the newest one and probably the most out there in terms of what people are seeing with her. So her embracing the Trump administration is also a direct change from where she was on the campaign trail in 2016.
Sure. We both asked her, are you supporting Donald Trump? And she wouldn't say if she would vote for him. She's not endorsing him, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Danielle, you talked to McSally last year about where she stood on the DACA kids, and it was a different bit of legislation she was supporting, and that's the one she's withdrawn her support from.
Yeah, so when I spoke to her, she was very proud of her support for the one that she just withdrew her name from. It's Recognizing American Children's Act. And she was very proud of that, and that one would have allowed a path to citizenship for Dreamers, given a number of restrictions. They had to be either in school, gainfully employed, or in the military. And that was a Republican-supported bill, and she was all for it. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like her opinion has changed.
Joe, we've seen a little bit of polling, but it seems to be mostly coming from the candidates themselves in this race as well. And it seems like most of the polls are showing McSally in the lead, but a few have Kelly Ward.
Kelly Ward was touting that exact mantra just a couple days ago when she visited Tucson. She declares herself to be the front runner. So in between the two women, they both say that they're in the lead, depending on which poll they want to pick and choose.
And have we had Joe Arpaio down here campaigning for this seat?
If he hasn't made a lot of waves.
No, we're going to have to wait and see if he even files. And that's the deadline that's coming up for all these candidates.
2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. I can't believe it's here already, campaign season. It's shocking. I want to also swing over to the state legislature. Speaking of campaign season, Danielle, candidates are going to be filing their paperwork. But you've been seeing some forums already. You went to one for the Democrats in Legislative District 9.
Yeah.
This is the district in central Tucson, the Catalina Foothills, the Casas Adobes area, a very competitive district. Steve Farley is stepping down as a senator there to run for governor. Who's running for that Senate seat now?
So we have Victoria Steele, who is a former state lawmaker, and she gave up her seat so that she could run for McSally's seat, and she ran against Matt Hines in the primary and lost to him. So now she's running for that seat again, and she's running against Jim Love, who is the president of the governing board of Flowing Wells Unified School District. And so Victoria Steele, she's a self-proclaimed feminist. She's a very compelling public speaker. She doesn't shy away from issues of race and gender, and she's very vocal about her support for stronger gun regulations. And Jim Love, I spoke with him after the forum, and he said he's the more moderate candidate, and because of that, he'll have better luck getting things passed at the legislature, because he'll be able to work with Republicans and be able to come to compromises easier than Victoria Steele will.
And then in the House race, you have two incumbents, Randy Freese and Pamela Powers Hanley,
Yeah.
and they picked up a challenger, J.P. Martin.
Yeah. So J.P. Martin is the newcomer. He doesn't have any political background. He has worked on some campaigns, but yeah, he's a newcomer. Everybody's curious to see who he is, and I also spoke with him before the forum, and he had some criticisms of Pamela Powers Hanley. Mainly, he said that she has trouble working with different factions, probably mainly Republicans, is what he was getting at, in order to get things passed. And he said that he could do a better job of that. He was also critical of her vote against the extension of Rio Nuevo. He said that basically that Rio Nuevo has helped downtown Tucson thrive, and she was one of the few Democrats that voted against that extension. And I spoke with her as well, and she told me that the reason why she voted against it was because there's not enough oversight and not enough transparency, and she also sees it as helping big business rather than local Tucson businesses. And so she said it's not fulfilling the purpose that it was created for.
And Joe, this is one of the most competitive districts in the state. Democrats have a slight registration lead, but we've seen Republicans win there before. Right?
Ethan Orr.
Right. The only Republican who seems to be stepping up again is Anna Henderson, who ran last time, in a very conservative Republican.
She is a very conservative Republican, and she's very, very well liked in the Republican Party. She's part of the leadership, and so she's well versed in working with news agencies and getting their message out there. We'll see if it resonates with the populace this time around.
And then I want to swing over to education. I mean, Red for Ed was a big moment at the end of the Arizona legislature. We had a teacher walkout for a week here in Tucson. And do you anticipate we're going to have a lot of education talk in the campaign season coming up, or does Ducey neutralize that to some degree by being able to provide what he says is a 20% raise for teachers?
Well, I've already been seeing, a new slogan being bandied about of "Remember in November." So it seems to me that educators are going to continue to push this issue all the way to November and keep advocating for themselves. Obviously, the fight has changed a little bit. Now we're seeing kind of some decisions made at the school districts and how they're going to spend the money. And I do expect some local news to come from that and affect downhill races.
Right, because they'll say, well, the school board members should have put more money, like in TUSD, towards teacher raises and not towards support staff. Or
Correct.
What have you. So that's going to be certainly a topic coming up. And Danielle, you were right in the midst of the Red for Ed stuff, and
Yeah.
you saw the teachers making their demands. And in terms of where they're at now, what are you hearing?
Yeah, so I'm hearing that it was very bittersweet. They want to keep. They're really happy about all the support they got. They want to keep that momentum going, which it seems like it is still going. At the LD9 forum I was at the other day, they were talking about Red for Ed, but I think it was bittersweet because they didn't get all their demands. They didn't get the raises for support staff, and they only got around a third of the funding education that they were asking for. So they're still working towards getting the rest of the things that they want to, that they see that education in Arizona needs to make it better, to get those needs met. And yeah, and then another thing, they're not entirely happy about some of the proposed funding sources for the raises. So that's kind of a controversial topic as well.
Right, Joe. A lot of them are saying we need a dedicated funding source of some kind to be able to actually afford both the increased pay for teachers who are leaving the state. I mean, we've got a real teacher shortage problem, as well as school repair and updating textbooks and computers and all the rest of that.
This isn't a short-term fix. And as the economy changes, we could see cuts again to education. So teachers are really looking for something that won't be affected by the legislature, won't be cut 2 years from now, won't be affected by the next economic crisis. And so they're looking for something that's politician-proof in some respects, so that there can be substantial long-term change rather than kind of a flash in the pan.
And the lawmakers did extend that sales tax for education, a 0.6 cent of a sales tax, and that's not going to go back before voters. But there is an effort now to raise the income tax to pay for more education, and they've got to get that on the ballot, but they don't have much time to collect those signatures.
End of the month, we'll see what happens in terms of getting enough signatures. It's a big task, and we'll see how many they turn in and whether that's challenged in the courts as well.
Right. And I wanted to also mention this week, or last 2 weeks really, we've had some good news at Raytheon, more jobs at Raytheon, the Amazon announcement of the warehouse. So that's about 3,500 jobs between those two things. Economics seem to be getting a little brighter here in southern Arizona.
Got some big news coming ahead. It's still not the highest that we've had for a census at Raytheon, but it's still building back up to where they used to be. And then Amazon a year from now, it's a big news.
And I talked to George Hammond, who's going to be doing a Breakfast for the Economists thing in a few weeks. He says they've revised a lot of numbers, that the job growth here has actually been better than what they originally anticipated. So things are, he's saying, looking very bright going into the rest of this year in 2019. All right, I think we're going to leave it there. I want to thank Danielle Kamara for coming by from the Tucson Weekly, and Joe Ferguson from the Arizona Daily Star to talk about these issues. That is our show for today. My thanks to our media partners at Tucson Weekly, Inside Tucson Business, Tucson Local Media, Creative Tucson, and Community Radio KXCI 91.3 FM, where you can hear a radio version of Zona Politics at 5 p.m. on Sunday afternoons. I'm Jim Ninsel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Zona Politics is made possible with the generous support of the Loft Cinema, Tucson's independent movie theater. The Loft features independent, foreign, and documentary films, cult classics, discussions with filmmakers, and much more, including the Loft Film Fest in November. The Loft is located at 3233 East Speedway Boulevard. Showtimes can be found at loftcinema.org. Support for Zona Politics is provided by Hotel Congress in historic downtown Tucson. More information at hotelcongress.com and 622-8848. The Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce serves the business community in the bilingual, bicultural region of the Arizona-Sonora border and is a proud media partner with Zona Politics. Learn more at TucsonHispanicChamber.org.
All of these young people from the community come together, actually get up and do something.
We can do anything!
I think we've attracted a lot of people that are super passionate.
We're here at the No Ban, No Wall protest.
If you come out of college, you have this experience, you know how things run, you have a huge leg up.
People who have ideas and who are dreamers, you know what I mean, who really want to get themselves out there. I think that they should come here.
Zona Politics is hosted by Tucson Weekly senior writer Jim Ninsel. The program is produced by Jennifer Powers Murphy and Danny Vinnick and edited by Jim Rundle. Special thanks to KXCI, Tucson Weekly, Brink Creative Digital, and all supporters who provide crucial funding for the program. Learn more about Zona Politics at zonapolitics.com and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter.